Tonight, we count down 15 underrated 1980s horror films that predicted modern fears. These weren't just movies, they were warnings. If you love horror that bites deeper, like, comment, and subscribe for more unsettling journeys into the forgotten vaults of cinema. Now, lock your doors, dim the lights, and get ready to revisit the shadows of yesterday, because some of these stories were never fiction to begin with. 1. The Hearse, 1980. Jane Hardy wants peace. After her mother dies and her marriage crumbles, she inherits a secluded country home once owned by her mysterious Aunt Rebecca. But tranquility is an illusion. Strange townsfolk leer with quiet menace. Eerie voices echo through the halls, and an ominous black hearse prowls the roads, seemingly possessed by something or someone. Directed by George Bowers, the hearse didn't scream for attention the way other ghost stories of the era did. It was modest, almost too subtle for its time. Critics shrugged, audiences missed it. But now, in an age where trauma is finally part of the cultural conversation, the hearse resonates with a chilling new relevance. Jane's descent is more than a haunting. It's a metaphor for inherited psychological scars. Aunt Rebecca's dark secrets, buried in dusty journals and forbidden artifacts, reflect the inescapable gravity of family curses. And the titular hearse, a literal and symbolic vehicle of death that follows her no matter how far she runs. Today we talk about generational trauma, about how we carry the unspoken sins and pain of our ancestors. The hearse whispered that truth 4 decades ago. Understated but powerful, this is one horror film that dared to explore the horror inside the bloodline, and the silence that enables it. Second Night Warning, 1982. Billy Lynch seems like your average high school athlete, but his world is anything but normal. Raised by his unhinged Aunt Cheryl after his parents died in a car crash, Billy becomes the object of her suffocating affection. When he tries to break free and go to college, she snaps, and people start dying. Directed by William Asher, Night Warning was buried under censorship, retitling, and a lack of mainstream support. Too psychological for the slasher crowd, too provocative for conservative audiences, it fell between genres and disappeared, until now. What makes this film so terrifying and eerily modern is its raw depiction of obsession and repression. Susan Tyrrell's performance as Cheryl is both unhinged and heartbreaking. Her love is warped beyond repair, twisted by decades of isolation, jealousy, and denial. But beyond the disturbing maternal fixation, Night Warning exposes something more insidious: the persecution of identity. Billy is harassed by a violent, homophobic detective convinced he's hiding secrets. The film boldly tackled anti-LGBTQ hysteria before it was safe to do so, making it decades ahead of its time. Today, when discussions around controlling parenting, toxic masculinity, and identity suppression dominate social dialogue, Night Warning reads like a nightmarish prophecy. It's more than a forgotten horror film. It's a tragic scream for autonomy in a world that punishes difference. Third Prom Night, 1980. Prom Night is supposed to be magical, but for Kim Hammond, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, it's a return to a memory she's been trying to bury. Years ago, she and a group of kids caused the accidental death of a young girl. They swore to never speak of it. Now, someone hasn't forgotten, and they want blood. Directed by Paul Lynch, Prom Night rode the early slasher wave, but never achieved the lasting fame of its peers. Overshadowed by Halloween and Friday the 13th, it was dismissed as just another body count movie. But behind its disco soundtrack and prom queen glamour lies a deeper theme: collective guilt. The killer isn't just stalking random teens. They're punishing those who chose silence over responsibility. In that way, Prom Night is about complicity, how people protect their futures by burying the past. It's about secrets kept for convenience, until someone else pays the price. Sound familiar? In today's era of canceled truths, viral retribution, and accountability culture, Prom Night hits differently. It exposes how the scars of childhood can metastasize into adult horrors, and how the sins we ignore don't stay buried. They come back, and they know how to dance. Fourth cue, The Winged Serpent, 1982. Above the jagged skyline of New York City, something ancient awakens. A winged Aztec god, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, begins nesting inside the crown of the Chrysler Building and feeding on unsuspecting citizens below. Only one man, a petty thief named Jimmy Quinn, knows the creature's secret, and he intends to leverage it for power. Directed by cult visionary Larry Cohen, Q. The Winged Serpent is a strange hybrid, part creature feature, part noir, crime drama, part commentary on urban decay. Critics didn't know what to do with it. Audi were baffled, but today it feels prophetic. The film's New York is broken. Corruption bleeds through City Hall. Police are ineffective. Inequality festers. And while people look to the sky in terror, those in power try to cover it up. Sound familiar? Jimmy Quinn, brilliantly played by Michael Moriarty, is no hero. He's desperate, paranoid, and broke, trapped in a system that chewed him up and spat him out. Rather than fight the monster, he bargains with it. It's a survival strategy we see echoed in today's society. Working within broken institutions, weaponizing secrets, trusting no one. Q wasn't just about a flying serpent. It was about the terror of living in a city where justice is for sale, power is predatory, and chaos rules from above. It's weird, wild, and weirdly relevant. 5. The Lair of the White Worm, 1988. In the rolling hills of the English countryside, something slithers beneath the soil. Archaeologist Angus Flint uncovers a strange skull. Just as Lady Sylvia Marsh arrives, oozing charm and dressed in leather. But Sylvia isn't just a seductive noblewoman. She's the high priestess of a pagan cult that worships a monstrous serpent god. And she's hungry. Directed by the ever-provocative Ken Russell and loosely based on a Bram Stoker novel, The Lair of the White Worm was too bizarre for mainstream horror fans. Critics called it campy, erotic nonsense. But under its glossy, surreal skin lies a powerful allegory. Lady Sylvia weaponizes sexuality like a ritual. She hypnotizes with language, disorients with symbolism, and bends truth like a serpent wrapping around prey. Sound like social media cults, disinformation rabbit holes, charismatic influencers spreading myth as fact? In today's climate of seductive ideologies and viral half-truths, this movie's campy chaos becomes chilling. It warns us of ancient forces dressed in modern masks, of how easy it is to fall under the spell of something old that only pretends to be new. And Amanda Donahoe's performance as Lady Sylvia? She's every modern manipulator in a single serpentine silhouette. Beautiful, deadly, convincing. The Lair of the White Worm is more than gothic absurdity. It's a warning about the ease with which belief can be twisted, and how quickly reason dissolves when fear takes over. 6. The Serpent and the Rainbow, 1988. Don't let them bury me. I'm not dead. That desperate whisper echoes through this hallucinatory descent into the underworld of Haitian voodoo. The Serpent and the Rainbow, directed by Wes Craven, follows anthropologist Dennis Allen as he investigates a drug that seemingly resurrects the dead. But what begins as scientific curiosity spirals into political unrest, supernatural terror, and psychological disintegration. This film didn't draw crowds like Craven's slasher hits. It was too philosophical, too rooted in real Haitian culture, too abstract. But in hindsight, it might be one of his most visionary works. Dennis's journey is about more than zombies. It's about the terror of losing control over your own mind and body, of being silenced, buried, forgotten, while still alive. It's the horror of institutions using medicine to erase, manipulate, and dominate. Today, in a world gripped by distrust in pharmaceutical giants, fear of medical coercion, and the trauma of mass illness, The Serpent and the Rainbow hits like a prophecy. The fear isn't just death. It's what comes before, the paralysis of autonomy, the terror of being conscious but voiceless. Craven blurs the line between dream and waking life, reality and ritual, science and superstition. And in doing so, he unveils the most terrifying question of all. What if the thing that saves you is also the thing that enslaves you? 7. The Hunger, 1983. In the opulent shadows of New York's art and music scene, Miriam and John Blaylock hunt not for food, but for time. The elegant vampire couple, played hauntingly by Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie, seduce and consume their lovers to maintain eternal youth. But when John begins to age rapidly and horrifically, they seek help from a gerontologist, played by Susan Sarandon, who becomes entangled in their twisted immortality. Directed by Tony Scott in his stylish debut, The Hunger was too strange, too artsy, and far too sensual for mainstream audiences in 1983. Critics didn't know what to make of its elegance. Viewers expected blood and gore. What they got was a slow, beautiful nightmare about aging, desire, and the fear of being left behind. Today, The Hunger feels like a psychic premonition. In our era of anti-aging injections, filtered faces, and a digital culture obsessed with youth, this film's central theme, what happens to those no longer desirable, cuts deep. John's decay is horrific not because it's unnatural, but because it's natural and unacceptable to Miriam. In a culture that feeds on youth and discards the aging like obsolete tech, The Hunger offers a gothic meditation on love, usefulness, and what we truly fear. When we look in the mirror, the film's cold, sterile beauty, its glassy architecture, its lingering silences, mirrors today's curated personas and synthetic identities. It's not just about vampires. It's about the things we do to avoid becoming invisible. Underrated for its sophistication, The Hunger is now recognized as a feminist, queer, and existential horror masterpiece. And with every passing year, it sinks its teeth deeper into the fears we try to bury beneath Botox and blue light. 8. Motel Hell, 1980. Farmer Vincent's smoked meats are the best in the county. People drive from miles around for a taste. But there's a secret ingredient he and his sister Ida keep buried in the garden out back, literally. Motel Hell is one of the strangest and most subversive horror comedies of the 1980s. Directed by Kevin Connor, it plays like a satire wrapped in a slasher. It was laughed off by some critics, embraced by cult horror fans, but largely overlooked in the mainstream conversation. Today, though, its twisted message couldn't be more relevant. Vincent's victims aren't just killed, they're farmed. He buries them alive, feeds them, fattens them up, and when the time comes, harvests them like livestock. It's a grotesque inversion of industrial agriculture, and a grim parody of how corporations treat both animals and consumers. In a modern world where fast food chains dominate, ingredient lists are unpronounceable, and food ethics are constantly questioned, Motel Hell feels like a greasy fever dream of uncomfortable truths. It literally asks, how well do you really know what you're eating? And then there's Vincent himself, folksy, friendly, soft-spoken, a perfect metaphor for corporations that wear a smile while they exploit. His motto, it takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent's fritters. Charming, until it isn't. The film climaxes in a chainsaw duel in pig masks, an absurd, unforgettable moment that underscores the film's central horror, the collapse of the line between man and meat. Motel Hell was dismissed as lowbrow horror, but in a time when food, sustainability, and consumer complicity are daily concerns, it reads like a grotesque prophecy, and it still tastes unsettlingly fresh. 9th Mother's Day, 1980. Deep in the forest, 3 women on a camping trip stumble into a cabin. Inside lives Mother, a grotesquely doting matriarch who rules over her 2 psychotic sons, with a blend of sugary affection and brutal control. What follows is a descent into captivity, ritualized violence, and psychological torment. Directed by Charles Kaufman and produced by Trauma Entertainment, Mother's Day was dismissed as exploitation trash. Critics condemned it for its brutal violence, cheap thrills, and misogynistic appearance. But beneath its grime and shock is a terrifying lens on manipulation, blind loyalty, and learned evil. Mother doesn't just enable her sons. She molds them. Her twisted lessons, her nursery rhyme tone, her absurd celebrations of torture, all serve to reinforce one idea. Mother knows best, even when she doesn't. Fast forward to today. Family cults, radicalized youth, echo chambers created within homes, generational hatred passed down like heirlooms. Mother's Day saw it all coming. The film's horror isn't supernatural, it's psychological. It's about how monsters aren't born, but built. How love, when twisted, can become a tool of tyranny. And how ideology passed from parent to child can mutate into violence. What seemed like grindhouse pulp in 1980 now feels like a bleak commentary on domestic extremism. It's messy, cruel, and difficult to watch. But maybe that's the point. Mother's Day is a movie that dares to ask, what if the scariest thing in the world is being raised wrong? 10. The Boogeyman, 1980. Modern fear, childhood trauma, repressed memory, and the inescapable past. When a young girl witnesses her brother murder their abusive stepfather through the reflection of a mirror, something evil is trapped in the glass. Years later, that mirror returns and shatters, releasing a supernatural force that brings their trauma violently back to life. Directed by eerily, The Boogeyman was labeled a Halloween knockoff and dismissed by many as derivative slasher fodder. But beneath its supernatural surface is something far more haunting. The idea that trauma never really dies. It just hides until something cracks. The mirror becomes a metaphor for repression. Every reflective surface in the film becomes a window to the past, a past too painful to face directly. As the force spreads, infecting others through shards of glass, it reveals how trauma, if left unresolved, metastasizes, hurts others, spreads like a virus of pain. Today we understand PTSD. We talk about childhood abuse, repressed memory, and inherited psychological scars. But the Boogeyman got there first, quietly, allegorically, and with blood. The violence isn't just physical, it's emotional. Every haunting is a consequence. Every possession a buried cry. And the horror isn't the ghost, it's the memory. Underrated and largely forgotten, The Boogeyman belongs in the modern canon of trauma horror, standing alongside films like The Babadook or Hereditary. It warned us decades ago, the things we refuse to confront don't disappear. They wait. 11. Dead and Buried, 1981. Modern fear, surveillance culture, synthetic identity, and loss of autonomy. A quaint seaside town is plagued by mysterious murders. Strangers arrive, are brutally killed, and then reappear alive, perfectly preserved, perfectly obedient. What's going on in Potter's Bluff? Directed by Gary Sherman and penned by Dan O'Bannon, Dead and Buried is atmospheric, slow-burning horror with a killer twist. Yet it was overshadowed by the more explosive hits of the decade, rarely finding the spotlight it deserved. The film's final reveal, that the town's coroner is reanimating corpses into mind-controlled citizens, lands with eerie weight today. It's no longer just zombie horror. It's about being reprogrammed, about having your individuality stripped, your body repurposed, your choices removed. In a digital age where our data is mined, our preferences are predicted, and our behavior is shaped by algorithms, the terror of Dead and Buried becomes disturbingly familiar. Who are we when we're being watched? What's left when we're told what to want? The film's gray, fog-soaked visuals mirror the moral fog of a society obsessed with perfection and control. It isn't about death, it's about living without freedom. Once overlooked, Dead and Buried now reads like a macabre parable about surveillance states and identity theft, in a world where your digital soul is easier to steal than your wallet. 12. Alone in the Dark, 1982. Modern fear, system failure, mass hysteria, and mental health neglect. When a new psychiatrist arrives at a rural mental hospital, he's met with suspicion, especially from the criminally insane patients housed in the facility's third floor. Then, a citywide blackout hits, and the asylum's high-tech security fails. The patients escape, and their doctor becomes the target. Directed by Jack Shoulder, Alone in the Dark was underrated from day one. It lacked the slash and gore appeal of bigger horror titles, instead opting for psychological tension and social commentary. But what makes this film terrifying in hindsight is its portrayal of institutional collapse. The hospital is supposed to be secure. The city is supposed to be safe. But one power outage, one flick of the switch, and the entire structure of society falls apart. It's a fear that echoed during real-world blackouts, natural disasters, and most recently, a global pandemic. What happens when the systems we trust fail, when the walls we build to contain chaos come crumbling down? The escape patients aren't just villains, they're symbols of ignored trauma, of society's neglect of mental illness, of what happens when those on the margins are left without care. Alone in the Dark isn't a jump scare factory. It's a creeping nightmare about the thin line between order and madness. And in an age of fragile infrastructure, it's more prophetic than ever. 13. The Stuff, 1985. Modern fear, addictive consumerism, marketing manipulation, and the loss of self. It's white, sweet, and sold by the gallon. It's called The Stuff, and it's America's favorite new dessert. But there's one small problem. It's alive. Larry Cohen's The Stuff is pure satire wrapped in body horror. A commentary on advertising, addiction, and mass hysteria. It was largely dismissed as silly or heavy-handed upon release. But, like the product it mocks, it grew, and it stuck. And today, it feels terrifyingly accurate. People become addicted to the stuff. It controls them, hollows them out, erases their individuality, all while being sold through smiling commercials, patriotic packaging, and relentless slogans. It's a parasite disguised as pleasure, a perfect metaphor for modern consumer culture. The fear isn't just that we're being sold poison, it's that we're choosing it, that we want it, that we're complicit in our own destruction because it tastes good going down. Think about social media, fast fashion, ultra-processed foods, surveillance devices we willingly invite into our homes. The Stuff warned us that once the market figures out how to package addiction, we won't stand a chance. It's funny, it's gross, and it's brilliant. The Stuff was never just a monster movie. It was a mirror, and we're still staring into it, spoon in hand. 14. Brain Damage, 1988. Modern fear, drug addiction, dopamine dependence, and identity decay. Meet Elmer. He's a talking parasite. He latches onto your brain, injects you with euphoric fluid, and while you're blissed out, he uses your body to kill. Frank Henenlotter's Brain. Damage is grotesque, surreal, and unapologetically weird. Critics dismissed it as low-budget sleaze, but beneath its slime-dripping surface lies one of the most powerful allegories for addiction ever put on screen. Brian, the main character, becomes hopelessly dependent on Elmer's high. He lies, he steals, he loses everything, and the worst part, he's aware, but unable to stop. This is no accident. Henenlotter was commenting on the heroin crisis of the time, but today the film reads like a prophecy of the opioid epidemic, internet dopamine addiction, and even social media burnout. Elmer could just as easily be a screen, a pill, a like button. The horror of brain damage is the erosion of identity. Watching someone you love turn into someone else. Watching yourself disappear, all in pursuit of that next hit. It's not pretty, it's not polished, but it's unforgettable. And in the age of engineered addiction, Brain Damage is one of the truest horror stories of them all. 15th Society, 1989. Modern fear, class division, elite corruption, and social cannibalism, Billy doesn't fit in. Even though he's from an upper-class Beverly Hills family, he feels different, disconnected. And when he starts digging, he uncovers a nightmare. His family, and the entire upper class, are part of a grotesque secret society. One that doesn't just exploit the poor, it consumes them, literally. Brian Yuzna's Society is one of the most surreal, disturbing body horror films of the decade. It was too strange, too political, and too visceral for wide release in the US. Upon its arrival, it was mostly ignored. But now, it feels like a manifesto. This is horror as class warfare. The grotesque shunting scene, where the rich melt into one another to devour a lower-class victim, is unforgettable and deeply symbolic. It's a physical representation of what we say metaphorically. The rich are feeding off the poor. In a time of wealth gaps, economic injustice, and elite impunity, society has become more than relevant. It's urgent. Billy's journey isn't just about discovering the truth. It's about realizing he was never part of their world, that the game was always rigged, and that some monsters wear human skin perfectly until they peel it off. You'll never look at polite society the same way again. If this journey chilled your spine and opened your eyes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more forgotten nightmares and prophetic terrors waiting in the shadows. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.